our grocery business division, looking particularly at the digital services there. Kesko or K Group we have about 42,000 employees in Finland, or actually worldwide if you count all the stores today. It's the smallest company I've worked for so far, so I'm little by little going into smaller roles. Before K Group, I spent some time with IKEA, leading multi-channel UX design there, and before that, about 10 years in different kinds of design and marketing roles at Nokia. So as said, where I come from, we are one of the biggest retailers in Northern Europe, number one in Finland, counting all our business areas, operating in 3 divisions: grocery, building and technical trade, and cars. About 50% of the turnover, a little over 50% of the turnover comes from grocery, which is probably the best known brands that most Finns somehow encounter every day in their everyday lives. The less known products we also sell might be Porsche and Bentley cars, which not everyone yet owns, me neither. As said, we're about 43,000 employees. One takeout from this fact sheet that I'd like to mention is the 1,100 retailers. We, especially in Finland and grocery and the DIY B2C business, we operate in this so-called retailer business model where the stores are owned and operated by entrepreneurs who run their own shops under the concepts and under the brands that we as a central company then operate, and then in turn the retailers are also the biggest shareholders in our company. So kind of running like that, and that obviously gives a little bit of detail into how we build digital services, how we build online grocery particularly, and also gives us a little bit of advantages in how to react in situations like what we had in the spring. Now it's a fact that things are changing. Change is constant, as we know, and well, no matter how you illustrate it, one example of illustrating my message here is by looking at the number of years it's taken different kinds of products or services to gain a certain number of users. But the fact is that change, the pace of change is becoming faster and faster. And what this of course means also is that companies such as ours, also in the sort of more traditional business areas, such as retail, have to change their way of thinking and have to learn new practices, which in turn leads to the importance of customer centricity, the importance of design thinking, and the importance of sort of business agility in developing what we do. Successful companies have learned practices in how to predict, how to do scenario planning, and how to sort of foresee a little bit of the changes that might be coming, and then in different kinds of ways realize what kind of new emerging needs there might be in the customer base, and then they learn to respond to that. But then of course there are also changes that people don't quite expect. And something that happened last spring, even though you probably you might say that yeah, but everybody should have seen the signs, and of course the virus was going to hit the whole world. You could see it already in December. Well, tell you what, a lot of people didn't see it. And I think I speak for many if I say that like the couple of weeks in the beginning of March in Finland were like quite, at least I personally had no clue what's going on most of the time. And then suddenly in the middle of March, the population in Finland was invited, so it seems, to this press conference by the government, where they basically put into place pretty strict lockdown measures on the country. Unforeseen, pretty much ever since the war, or even before the war. The change was pretty dramatic. At least in my own personal life, I could see like all of a sudden the kids were at home, the parents were at home. There was no more library, there was no more hobbies, there was no more pretty much anything except an endless Microsoft Teams meeting from about 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Because something that of course also happened was that the whole sort of business landscape started to change. And one of the interesting changes was that regardless of what kind of lockdown measures you put into place, what kind of quarantines you put into place, people still need to eat. And myself, me and my team were already at that time mostly working with our online grocery service, and website development and service design there. And just for like to put the background into place a little bit, online grocery in Finland has never been like the biggest thing out there. Finland has never been on the forefront, but it's been a growing business, and there was a pretty like steady growth in sales and a good prognosis of how we're going to grow, how the market is likely to grow in the coming years. And then all of a sudden, on the left you have Google Trends on different kinds of search terms related to buying food online in Finland. And on the right hand side there's comparison of online sales of food 2019 and this year. And I guess the mid-March is about here. I don't actually know if people are seeing what I'm pointing at out there, but in any case it's where the bars start to grow. And you could pretty much say that the market suddenly accelerated in a couple of weeks what it was supposed to grow in a couple of years. There's a lot of heroes on the team, the sort of operative team running the services for the retailers, operating online stores. It's not a big team. I could tell a whole different story about how they grew the number of stores selling online from like about 200 to over 400. And but I'm not going to tell that. I'm going to tell another story, because something that also happened was that while the sales sort of skyrocketed and the demand for online sales of food skyrocketed, we also identified that there's a whole different group of people who are not used to buying food online. It's not a big surprise, I guess, that online grocery as a service in general, it's traditionally been most lucrative for families with children in urban areas with much to buy, little time, and a huge logistical challenge. That's my life as well. And I'm totally dependent on that, by the way, buying food online. But then with the sort of corona limitations put into place, especially people over 70 were urged to stay home and pretty much quarantine themselves. And a lot of them didn't even dare to go to the shops. A lot of people still went to supermarkets, then they came home, and that was safe and that was fine. But a lot of these people didn't want to do it. And the problem, of course, was that a lot of the more elderly customers had never bought anything online, let alone food. The services we have, since if I'm responsible for the user experience there, I can say that it's not optimized for elderly users, at least not yet. So we had a lot of people wanting to buy food online, not exactly knowing how to do it, if it's even possible. And when they started doing it, they typically needed support, and we had no support channel to offer them. My mother-in-law tells me she used to work her mother used to work in a small village shop when she was smaller. And she told me that already in the 60s people would phone in and make orders. And of course that's not the case you can do today. And also, especially late March, the staff in the stores had a lot of other things to do than just answer phone. So basically we'd identified a whole number of potential problems here. We had huge growth of demand. Customers we were not prepared to serve. and we had no channel to help them to answer the special customer need we just identified. Luckily, what we also found out was that in this endless Microsoft Teams meeting between 7 and 7, a lot of people were standing up and saying, hey, let's do something. We had been preparing a sort of internal innovation management platform, sort of to gather ideas and prioritize them and find out new things we could do for already some time. So the first thing we did was decide, okay, can we launch it like tomorrow? Found out that yes, we can. It wasn't beautiful, but we launched it. So we started getting a huge number of ideas from around the organization of how we could serve these needs we just identified. What we also found out that people were really willing to step outside of the old boundaries of this is my job and say, okay, in my current job, I don't have that much to do. What can I do to help? And particularly we found out that in the food service business wing, Kespro, whose main clientele is restaurants, who obviously had a lot less business in their hands. They had a fully staffed phone customer service, like contact center, who really didn't get that much phone calls. So we sort of started putting 1+1. Could we get those people to answer the phone and help these people to make their online purchases, so the stores would start getting less phone calls and people would start getting better service. And what happened there, I'm gonna fast forward a little bit, because I was reading through the messages we had on chat during that week that ended on March 27th. March 27th, we actually launched the helpline and started getting calls. After just 1 week of planning, there was no steering group, there was no formal management board decision. There was a couple of phone calls of me calling my boss, calling her boss, and everyone saying, yeah, just do it. And there was a lot of people taking responsibility and working together to get this launched. Early April we got about 1,700, during April we got about 1,700 calls on the line, which was quite good considering it was just launched. We got good media coverage on it as well, which is particularly warming since it was never intended to be like a PR campaign. It was like an honest service that sort of emerged from ground up from the organization based on real customer need. Of course, after the media coverage, we also, or in addition to the media coverage, we also ran a media campaign to get more visibility, which then again led to more calls. We were not the only ones. Internally, a couple of other big new innovative ideas were launched actually during that same week, like car rental services for restaurants who suddenly needed help with home transport. We found an old web form on the side of a server and launched a food ordering service for our convenience store chain, Neste K. A few stores took it into use and started selling a lot of actually restaurant food using that. That was done in a day. And of course, also companies outside of K Group, I think, used very much the same sort of mindset to find new success in a challenging business situation. Now, a couple of minutes I'm still going to use on the reflections on what we learned. We've actually looked back into what happened during the springtime, and maybe I need to give a bit of background in saying big traditional companies are not always the most agile organizations out there, and typically there are quite complicated decision-making structures. Sometimes governance slows innovation when it's not really necessary. And we succeeded really well during the spring. There was a lot of factors affecting that, but some factors that also led to things like this phone service, phone helpline being launched. There was a lot less long-term planning. There was clear goals of this is where we're going. There was a clear strategy. This is what we're focusing on. But there was a lot less. Let's list out exactly the features that we will be building in September, when suddenly nobody knew exactly what's going to happen in September. There was a lot less debate. There was a lot more action. There was a lot more responding to data. There was a lot more responding to insight rapidly. There was a lot less monthly meetings. There was a lot more daily meetings between the people who actually did things. And actually, something that I think is really interesting is we have about 80 years, well, depending on how you count, but we have between 80 and more than 100 years of history as a retail chain. I came across some guidelines, instructions from, I think it was the 1920s, 1930s, intended for new K-branded retailers, new store owners, of how to make your business succeed. And there was a lot of this in that guide, in those guidelines. Basically, what I've been saying is that these grocery retailers are probably the original service designers of Finland. They are the original customer centricity advocates of Finland. And they are also the people who look at what's going on. They make a hypothesis, they test quickly, they build, and then if it doesn't work, they rebuild. And if it works, then they build something else next. I think one of the key success factors there was really going back into this retailer mindset and understanding, and rethinking a little bit the way of thinking. There was a lot less, this is my job and this is what I'm going to do. And there was a lot more, what is the job to be done and who could maybe do it. There was a lot less starting with solution, which is one of the key, I think, fundamental sins of bigger companies. And there was a lot more starting with customer need, understanding the problem, and quickly thinking up different kinds of solutions. And finally, there was a lot less long-term plans that you follow. And there was a lot more sort of test and iterate mindset. And now this rethinking of these kinds of attitudes, I think, is now the big question. The COVID pandemic helped us, and I think it helped other companies similarly to dive into the agile world, to dive into the more customer-centric world. Now the big question is really, what can we learn from it and make stick in the long term? How do we make this into running practice and not just something that happened in the sort of forced setup of March and April 2020? Turning that into behavior that goes across the whole organization and sticks with us, that's something that we are doing. Things are back to normal in a way, even though they're not. But we're keeping up with the learnings from last spring. Thank you.
Thank you, Jussi. You're welcome to send any questions through the chat if you have any questions for Jussi. Meanwhile, I'm going to ask you a burning question that I do have. We gave earlier on the Customer Award Finland honorary mention to this hotline phone service for elderly people for the K group. Is it still running? Are there still calls made to that phone number?
There are still calls being made. I said in April we got about 1,700 calls, and now it's the average numbers since June. It's been pretty steady since June. It's about 500 calls per month, which
okay, so like a one
is
third.
Okay, yeah. And it's about 50-50, quite clear 50-50 split between calls to the sort of order helpline, which means I want to buy, please make me an order, and the normal support helpline, just asking for help.
Okay, so
and we even sell, like there are actual orders being made through that.
I would assume
helpline.
So. I would assume so. I mean, that was really a nice gesture. I mean, you did it because you had the not just the customer need, but I understood that the need came also from the actual merchants or your K.
There was a lot of needs emerging at the same time, so it helped the customers, it helped the retailers, and it even helped the customer support organization that suddenly had people who didn't get calls, and then they started getting calls again.
Right.
And it was a really good example of people from different parts of the organization coming together for this common sort of goal, common need.
Yeah, I think that's a really good example of things not just clicking because they have to, but also because there was a will, and then you found a way that you could actually make it happen for people, and in such a short time, which is basically unbelievable, knowing the organization and knowing that big companies don't move so fast.
They
usually.
don't always move so fast.
No. So my burning question really is that what stayed out of all this agility that you brought into the company? That have you changed the culture? Has it changed the culture of designing and creating these services in the long run?
Cultures don't change overnight, I think. But I think something that did change was that I personally at least see a lot more collaboration happening. So there's, with this kind of, these people need to talk to these people, and actually people doing things together started forming, kind of bonds, so that people start knowing each other from different parts of the organization. Yeah. So these kind of collaborations can then emerge again. Okay,
well, good luck with that.
I've worked with people from logistics that I didn't know existed before.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jussi, for giving us this talk, and it was really a good example of what can be done when you just want to. In the similar fashion that Pekka Hyysalo was telling us earlier on about fight back, so you were doing fight back in your organization. Thank you so much, Jussi.
Thank you.
Thank you, and let's have a really nice CX Day evening.